Hi, everybody. My name is Pam Winfrey, and I'm your new host for the ASU Leonardo Lasers. Lasers are these opportunities for artists and scientists and interesting people and from all sorts of kinds of disciplines to get together and think together and discuss together, make new connections, maybe even find some new ways to collaborate. But it's really all about community, and that's what we're trying to do tonight. These are going to be monthly meetings. We'll have all sorts of different themes. We have things like resilience, social justice. So it'll be a very interesting group of people. And I hope that you will feel free to connect with me at any time about ideas, things that you think are working, things that aren't, because I'm really trying to build something here for us all. Let's see, what else do I have to say? Let's get on to the good stuff. Since Halloween is in a few days and we're not able to really celebrate it in the ways that we want to, we thought that we would create a special laser that's thematically connected. And we want to explore this concept of why do zombies refuse to die? They're in our literature, they're in our media, they're in our nightmares, and they just seem to keep going on and on and on. In fact, our current modern life could be considered a series of zombifying events, and they're designed to make us squirm. I mean, we've been squirming for months now, right? So today we have Dr. Athena Aktipis, Dr. Robin Nelson, artist Jillian, McDonald, and filmmaker Henry Kaplan to try to help us answer that question and to answer other questions as well. Each panelist will speak for 7 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for discussion. And I hope that you guys, when you're listening to this stuff, that, jot down your questions, because that's really what we want to hear from is you guys. So we'll start with Dr. Athena Aktipis. She studies cooperation across systems from human sharing to cancer. She's also the chair of the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Meeting, host of the new podcast Zombified, aka Channel Z, and author of the forthcoming book, The Cheating Cell: How Evolution Helps Us Understand and Treat Cancer. Okay, Athena, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Pam. It is my absolute pleasure to be here for the first ASU Leonardo Laser and to be talking about zombies, one of my favorite topics. So as Pam said, I am the chair of the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Alliance, and I also study cooperation. I'm an associate professor in the psych department at ASU, and my book is actually not forthcoming. It's out. I've got it over there, The Cheating Cell. And that's about cancer and cooperation. I'm not going to talk much about that, but in case you're interested in the connection between cancer and zombies, you can kind of think about cancer as the zombie apocalypse happening inside you, if you want to make that analogy. So let's jump right in and talk about zombies and why they won't die. For me, I can tell you why they won't die. It's because they animate my imagination. And I think for a lot of us, they kind of, burrow their way inside our brains and eat away at them without us even quite realizing how much they're consuming. So for me, there are kind of two aspects of why zombies are so compelling. One is, and this is sort of where I started with my interest in zombies, is actually the scientific side of zombies. So across life, there are so many species of parasites, organisms that make a living off of other organisms in one way or another. In fact, by some measures, half or more than half of all the species on Earth are parasites. And parasites are kind of a, one way of thinking about what zombies are. When you have one organism that kind of hijacks another organism for its own goals. And this whole idea of kind of zombification is one way of kind of expanding that biological notion of hijacking to a lot of other things that we might not necessarily think about as parasitism immediately, but the way that we influence each other, the way that humans influence each other, the way that social media takes over our brains, how many of us are hijacked by these devices that we keep on our person or near us at all times. So I sort of started with really this fascination with this idea of zombies and zombification as a biological process. And then that kind of expanded into thinking about these social processes. And then once I kind of became just obsessed enough with zombies in the sort of scientific and biological sense, that started really spilling over into an interest in zombie movies. And I really never was a horror movie person, but I have really come to find a deep resonance with zombie movies. Partially, I think, because a lot of them, they're not so much about like horror of something scary from outside, but really they're about the parts of human nature that we ourselves are frightened of. And many times zombie stories force us to reflect on really what it means to be human and how we can kind of examine how our humanity sometimes gets challenged in difficult situations, and sometimes it is able to carry us through, but other times there are aspects of human nature that can really make it difficult for us to deal with challenges. So that sort of social and artistic side of zombies, it kind of came last for me, which is maybe not the way it is for most people who get interested in zombies from sort of the artistic side and then maybe realize after that there's a scientific side to them. So I just wanted to share with you guys real quick. I'm going to share my screen so that I can tell you a little bit about some of these projects that Pam mentioned. And I'll start with ZAM, the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Meeting. So this is our website, zombiemed.org. And this is the sort of home for the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Alliance, which is the umbrella organization that runs the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Meeting, and that also runs Channel Z, which is our video, and the Zombify Podcast. So here you can learn a little bit about sort of how we talk about zombies and what the point really is of what we're doing. This is a nice summary, really. Essentially, what we're trying to do is create an interdisciplinary space that bridges science, arts, humanities, policy, medicine, and allows a space for us to really look at what is this zombification process, and how are there parallels between what happens between hosts and parasites, what happens with autonomous technology, what happens in human interactions where there are coercion and control dynamics, and trying to kind of bring together all of these different academic disciplines to look at these sort of phenomena of influence and control, and then also to kind of challenge us to go beyond our comfort zone in terms of imagining the future. And the zombie apocalypse is actually a really nice tool for this, because in a zombie apocalypse, there's chaos, right? And depending on what kind of zombie apocalypse you're imagining, a lot of the structures that we have in place, they're gone, or to some degree they're compromised. And I think that almost offers like a blank slate sort of to think about, what would we want to build in terms of society. And it's also a way to kind of get past the fear of change, because you're just imagining a zombie apocalypse and then saying, okay, how could we engage about things about our present and our future that may be really scary, but approach them with imagination and creativity. So that's really kind of the goal with ZAMA, which is the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Alliance, and ZAM, which is the Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Meeting, is to create that space. And I mentioned the Zombify Podcast. So this is a podcast with long form conversations. So they're each about an hour, with scholars and scientists. And this latest one we have with a competitive athlete who is also a sociologist. And all of the Zombify podcasts are about aspects of how our brains get taken over by things, whether it's the birth control pill or our relationships or placentas or our GPS. So many different ways that our brains can be taken over. And I work with a wonderful artist, Neil Smith, who creates these illustrations and really brings to life these topics, and I absolutely adore working with him. Not only is it fun, it also really feeds the creativity of the whole endeavor to have these, wonderful visual representations of each of the episodes. And then finally, we have Channel Z. So Channel Z is our newest concept, and it's video based, and we actually held the last ZAM meeting entirely as a streamed meeting. It was live streamed on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter, and people could interact live through all those platforms. And now if you go to our Channel Z website, you can actually play through the entire meeting as a playlist, and you can look at previous episodes. And every Monday we make a new episode as well. So you can tune in live on Mondays at 10:30 PDT and join us and interact with us on that platform. We also have a YouTube page where we have various playlists that you can go to and see all of our shows, and we live stream live there. So you can chat with us as the show is going on. We can pull in your comments and have a interactive conversation. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing here and hand the floor back over to Pam. Thank you.
Oh, it's such a great program. You'll have to catch some of it because it's pretty innovative, because it was Athena's attempt to try to de-zombify Zooming, which, we all are battling right now. And I think it was an incredible attempt to do that. I should also say that ZAM, this is the second conference. The first conference happened in 2018, and I'm going to present the next person. Well, we'll hold on to that thought for a minute, but the next person is Dr. Robin Nelson. And she participated in the 2020 ZAM. She's a biological anthropologist who utilizes evolutionary theory in studies of human sociality, and health outcomes. She has written papers on Jamaican children who must live without their families, sexual harassment and assault, and issues of equity. She's currently developing a project exploring the lives of Caribbean immigrants and their children in Toronto, Canada. Okay. Robin, you're next.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Pamela. This is a wonderful event, and I'm happy to be a part of it. I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight. I'm going to share my screen and talk to you a little bit about the ways that I have been thinking about zombies and what they represent in terms of a kind of cultural moment. So I'm going to talk just for 7 minutes, I promise. I know you're like a PowerPoint, but just 7 minutes, I promise, about race and the body. Because for me, when I think about zombies, I think about culturally what we are afraid of when we think about zombies, where they come from, and what we're trying to hide from. And so when I started to think about the zombies and zombies and race, I started to think about the way that Black people are perceived in pop culture and in the world, right? And so I thought about this famous Vogue cover with LeBron James and Giselle, which is kind of a throwback to the King Kong brute, idea about the extra strong, extra scary Black man. You might remember this New Yorker cover with Barack and Michelle, where it had them mocked up, and it was in mocking, but still, as terrorists with a terrorist fist bump, and Michelle Obama had an afro, which she doesn't wear normally, right? So these ideas about difference. And then this cartoon of Serena Williams after she threw a fit at one of her tennis matches, and you can see that her body is bigger than it normally is. Her lips are bigger than they normally are. Her nose is exaggerated. Everything's exaggerated. And so I started to think about, like, how can we think about this concept of zombies and this thing that won't die as it relates to race. And I started just taking a gander at some of the studies that look at our perceptions of Black people in the world and the ways that those concepts won't die. So there were these studies that showed that racial bias and judgments of physical size and formidability, this is what they're examining, from size to threat. And it was showing that Black people, specifically in this case, Black men, are perceived by others to be bigger, more aggressive, and stronger, more muscular than white men of the same size. And so this leads to kind of over-policing, right, and more aggressive policing when they are being policed. We also know, you might know, I know this because I think about bodies a lot, right? But about these, the way that the tests that test your kidney function have been are kind of steeped in old ideas about differences between Black people and white people. And these tests won't die. So in my case, when I'm thinking about the zombie that won't die, I'm thinking about the way that we kind of position different types of bodies and how that idea is so resilient. And so another examination here of Black men talking about how being tall increases people's stereotyping of Black men. And also just disciplining Black bodies and the way that we want to regulate Black bodies in the public. We can think about cleanliness and what we expect about cleanliness and proper appearance for Black bodies, and sexuality. And so I guess what I would like to kind of say here is that these ideas about zombies and Blackness, they get tied up together because we only see Black people in this way if we don't see them as human. Right? So they are the zombie in this particular instance. And so here I just have a clip here. So what about Black zombies? This is from Fear the Walking Dead from AMC.com. How did we get to this idea about Black bodies and zombies? And so many of you are familiar, of course, with like the zombie idea coming out of Haiti, and this idea of the mental possession of people kind of emanating from voodoo practice. But it's interesting that when researchers would speak to people from Haiti, they would talk about a fear of becoming a zombie, not a fear of the zombies. So when we watch all of our films, we're always kind of afraid of the zombies, right? And in this case, people would say, well, you don't want to be possessed. You don't want to be taken over. And so if you're in the group that's being labeled, you don't want to be taken over by that, whereas everyone is also afraid of Black people. So you can see there's like a dualism in that space. And so I thought a little bit about like how this kind of emerged and why is it so daggone resilient? And why do these ideas about Blackness as other, why don't they die, right? And so if we think about kind of colonialism, and I'm just using this map here from 1923, but it's the map is actually of a space from 1700 to 1763. To look a little bit about colonialism and the spread of kind of ideas about race, we know that from the beginning, we understood race was created as a way to rank races. So as Shay Akil McLean says, a recent graduate, a recent PhD in bioanthro, he says that, you know, there is no racism without race. I mean, there's no race without racism, right? You can't have racial differences without the ranking. And we see this as like very, very durable in the history of biological anthropology. There's not just these different races, they're always, always ranked, all the way back to Linnaeus, who we probably think of as just kind of a taxonomist, right? But he had these rankings as well. We know this shows up with discussions of craniometry, right? And measuring skulls, and that was really durable. And so even when researchers like Boaz were trying to push back and say, no, this is about environment, these ideas about difference and difference being durable and some people being scary, this has stuck with us for a very long time. And so Sherwood Washburn, who was an anthropologist who kind of wrote a kind of discipline shaping paper in 1951, said that the number of races will depend on the purpose of the classification. I think we should require people who propose a classification of races to state in the first place why they wish to divide the human species, right? And so I thought about this with regards to zombies and the idea of the undead. Why can't these ideas die? If we think about race and racism as a zombified idea, and it keeps coming back, and it's so durable, and it haunts the lives of people who have to live as being pitched as zombies. Why? Well, it's durable because of power, right? There's power in the hierarchy. It's durable because of privilege, and it's durable because of the status quo. And so in this moment of, upheaval with regards to the pandemic and upheaval with regards to kind of social unrest and race and racism, people have been speaking a lot about anti-racism and kind of wanting to be anti-racist. And I guess I ask often if we can kind of mold this into thinking about it like a zombie. Do you really want to kill it? And what would you lose if you really killed this zombie? What would you have to give up in this hierarchy? So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Oh, that was really wonderful, Robin. Great stuff to think about.
I can't get my screen share to stop. All right, stop. Sorry, guys.
This is our first one, Robin. So, we're all kind of working it out as we go.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So let's move on to Jillian. Jillian McDonald is a conceptual artist and curator from Canada. Speaking of Canada, her interests are the American celebrity culture, extreme fandom, themes and characters from horror films, which seems right up our alley. Recent work includes zombies, the undead, masks, and paranormal experiences, and is often set in northern landscapes. Jillian did some really great performances for us during the first inaugural ZAM 2018. So I'm very glad to have an opportunity to welcome her back. So Jillian.
Hi. Thank you, Pam. I'm really excited to be working with you again on this. I am a visual artist, as Pam said, and don't have any scientific thinking at all in my work, but it's interesting to hear both of the previous presenters because there's actually a lot of overlap, surprisingly, for me in the work that I'm doing. So I've been making work about horror films since about 2006, which is a really long time. And I'm going to share my screen and show a lot of slides and very short video clips, and move really fast through a lot of work that has happened in those years. So here we go. Hopefully this is working. Let's see. All right, so in 2006, I was, like Athena mentioned, an outsider horror film fan. I was not, I did not enjoy the idea of being scared, and was kind of thinking about this as a research project. Why is it that people can enjoy the thrill of being scared? And really quickly started watching a lot of horror films and reading horror theory and realizing I didn't care so much about that question anymore, because I was like completely hooked by all the archetypes of horror, the recycled narratives, the constant sequels, and the archetypes, specifically zombies, vampires, masked characters, etc., and really particularly the zombie. This is going to show you just this little clip from while I'm talking over it, of the first work that I made about horror films, and it's a performance on the subway in New York City. One of the other things I noticed about horror films when I was starting getting interested in them is the makeup and how important it is to the story and how important it is to help us suspend our disbelief. So I put my makeup on the subway, and instead of trying to make myself look good like everyone else who puts their makeup on the subway, I turned myself into a zombie and shuffled off and made the kind of natural population that happened to be on the subway. And while thinking about that, another of the things that I was interested in with zombies was, oh shoot, sorry. I'm not a Zoom pro. Shoot. That was fine. Okay.
Doing great.
So I was thinking about the idea of the chase, which is always the climax in zombie films, and it's sort of ridiculous because no matter how slow the zombies are, and they're not always slow, we can never get away from them. This was a 2-channel projection where the audience stands in the middle. So if they look one way, they see the zombie shuffling towards them, and therefore they are the victim. And if they look the other way, they see the victim running away, and they are the zombie. But they're actually the same thing. And that was an interesting thing to me too about zombie films, is that the worst thing that can happen to you is that you become the zombie. And it's kind of really the only thing that happens in the zombie films. Another thing that I was interested in with that last piece, not so much in this one, is landscape, and how landscape is so important to horror films as well. So I started, after this one, you'll see I start kind of going out into landscape and making work in specific locations. This is a scene from a film called The Screaming that I made in 2007, in which I inserted myself into many different horror films, including zombie films, and screamed as a powerful gesture. So instead of being the femme fatale, screaming because I'm in trouble, I'm screaming as like this gesture to, at the beginning of the film, make the characters go away, the monsters, the horror go away, and by the end really like radically destroy the horror. So little did I know that zombies were actually really becoming popular at this time. As I said, I went in knowing nothing about zombies and just got really intrigued by them. But because I was making artwork about zombies, I started getting invited to lots of different projects because zombies were really very much in the zeitgeist. Excuse me. So in 2008, I got invited to Toronto in Canada for Nuit Blanche, which is a all-night performance and public art project that goes on all over the city with projects and different artists from all over the world. And so what I did is I created the guise of a zombie film shoot. But instead of passersby being shooed away or corralled to like a watching area, they were brought in. So we had makeup tents and acting instructions. I don't know how much acting you need for zombies, but you need a little. And any passerby could participate, and thousands of people actually participated. And I was with a megaphone, and it all happened so fast, and so like it was so like chaotic and crazy and amazing that I have very few photographs of this project. But there was a megaphone, and I was directing large crowds of people with to be part of zombie scenes that are kind of typical scenes from films. But there was actually no zombie film shot. And looking at crowds like this really freaks me out these days, but it was a very crowded, kind of chaotic, amazing experience. And many, many people showed up already dressed as zombies. Very different kind of piece here. This is shot in California, but this is where I'm talking about going out into landscapes and when I really became that became part of my practice. So I went to California and shot this really long piece. It's about 25 minutes long. It's called Field of the Dead and Undead. And it's more like a moving painting. It's got completely the opposite feeling of that kind of chaos of the last piece I showed you. But all the people in the film, and there's about 30 different actors, slowly die and get reanimated. And this is kind of a labor of love. I'm going to skip ahead and show you a couple of different clips, but every actor was shot separately in the same location. And then I cut them all out frame by frame, which is a super long, intensive process to create this scene where they all flow in and out of each other. And the light is different on all of them. So they all have this kind of otherworldly feeling. But I was, kind of really getting interested in all the different metaphors and ideas associated with zombie films, like apocalyptic narratives, contagion narratives, claustrophobic and xenophobic, and loss of individuality kind of narratives. And this was a little bit of an attempt to kind of give back a sense of individuality to the characters. And it goes on really long. And then it's in the same, so that was 2008, 2009, I went to Sweden and did a wonderful collaboration, wonderful in the sense that this organization is really fabulous. They're called Lilith Performance Studio, and they invite artists from all over the world to come and realize a dream project. So we put posters up all over the city inviting zombies and vampires to join us, and hundreds of people showed up at the auditions. And we kind of whittled it down to about 100, which is still a lot. I'd never really directed people in that sense in a large crowd, but we did it and honed these performances of vampires and zombies. So the idea was a narrative in the woods, a very cinematic experience that audience members were brought to a few at a time in the dark, lit only by flashlights. And it was absolutely terrifying. If anybody's a horror fan, you know that zombies and vampires are completely different mythologies and they sort of never mix. But in this case, they mixed. And they're not natural enemies. They don't, it's kind of an absurd thing. So there was a lot of humor, even though it was also like actually truly terrifying. So the zombies were just kind of lumbering around and kind of passing through the audience and coming from leaves, and it's really kind of chaotic and horrifying. And the vampires were having concerts and seduction scenes, etc. So kind of a mix of things. And somehow it worked. In the same year, kind of still with those same ideas, I went to Arizona. Actually, the Arizona State University Art Museum hosted me to do a project with students and people of all walks of life, car mechanics, teachers, all kinds of people came and participated. And many of them had never acted before. So we worked to help them get comfortable in front of the camera, working every day and auditioning and working on different scenes, coming up with ideas together and collaborating, creating makeup looks. And then, taking into mind also not horror films only, but also the Western, which is another film genre that thinks about landscape a lot, and where landscape is almost a character. And I found it hard to go to the Southwest and not think about the Western. So here we have the vampires in black and the zombies in white. And if you know anything about Westerns, the people in white are the good guys and they often win. So the zombies actually won. And what it ended up being was a kind of showdown in the desert. And here's the kind of a shot of the art installation, which was vampires on the left projected, zombies on the right projected. They had their own kind of narrative in the landscape. And at the end, the sun came up and the vampires all go away and the zombies don't really know what happened, but they do win. But in the installation was surrounded by photography from the desert. And I also make a lot of drawings and some drawings of horror films. These are 2 drawings. I haven't looked at a lot of this work in a long time, but when I was putting this together, I realized this drawing of all the zombies from Night of the Living Dead and this drawing of all the zombies from Day of the Dead are kind of like 2 different interesting kind of metaphors of zombies. One of them as the kind of shuffling, going along with the ideas, not really thinking too much crowd, and then the ravenous horde that sucks our life force and our lives.
You're out of time.
And so now 2013, I'm not really making zombie artwork anymore, but looking back, I think I am. So I made this film. It was 25 minutes long. It's a 3-channel projection. And all of the characters are very zombie-like. It's a hunting narrative between animal masked characters from Scottish folklore, and the characters kind of sway in a hypnotic way and eventually take down the deer. And there's a very violent scene at the end where the animals all kind of eat the deer, and it ends with rainbows, and starts with rainbows and ends with rainbows because there's always rainbows in Scotland, it turns out. And even the sheep are like zombies in the shot. There's just a shot of the installation, and just a couple more things, I'm almost done. In 2018, as Pam mentioned, I came to Arizona again for the ZAM meeting, which was like one of the most fantastic conferences I've ever been to. So if you're out there listening and you're interested in that conference, you should check it out. But I made a bunch of small micro performances on Instagram with wonderful participants who were willing to do all kinds of things, like eat flowers in the supermarket and walk into swimming pools and fall off their bikes, to suggest that anyone is zombified. We're all kind of zombified in different ways and ordinary things. And the last thing I want to show you is from 2020. I just finished this film called The Dark Season that's shot in Svalbard. Also not intending to be zombies, but the characters, I feel like, why do zombies die? I think it's because sometimes we don't want them to die. They're just like, they're fascinating characters, and we're always encountering them. So I'll just show you one couple seconds from this. Just one scene. And so, again, not intending to be zombies, but when I'm looking at them now in this context, all these characters are very zombie-like. Like that polar bear. And I'm going to stop sharing. Oops.
That's wonderful work, Jillian. It makes me realize how much the situation that we're in right now, everything I look at is lensed through this COVID riotous, hideous moment. And so every time I was looking at those images, some of which I haven't seen before, it felt very resonant with our times. And on that note, I'd like to introduce Henry Kaplan. I wanted to just preface Henry's film. I saw it in 2018 and I really loved it because I felt like it is a zombie film, but I felt like it was actually a zombie film that was focusing mostly on our humanity and what makes us human. And then I rewatched it about 4 months ago, and it resonated in a different way. And I think that's one of the powerful things about art is that it follows you in your head. And when you have these situations, and this is the situation we're in right now, is just such an extreme situation that everything you experience is lensed through what we're going through right now. And so I just wanted to talk about how that work has changed for me. But the one core thing is about the humanness of us all. Henry, he's a rather enigmatic guy. I couldn't find a bio online at all with this man, but he has stellar work, and that's how I know he does exist. Now, he actually might be a zombie on his own because it looks as though he's been producing films since like 1970, and he looks like he's 30. So I don't know what to do about that unless his father was a filmmaker as well. But we will have the opportunity to watch this film that I was mentioning, and it is an intense film, but I think a really beautiful film. So Henry, take it away.
Thank you so much, Pam. I'm very happy to be here. This is so interesting. Everybody's presentation has kind of blown my mind in a different way. And I think there's a lot of overlap too. Whenever everyone was talking, I was thinking about how it all has to do with each other and has to do with my film. I'm not going to say much. My film's 7 minutes long, so it'll fill out my time. But I'll just say that I'm a fan of the idea of zombies. I'm not a zombie movie fan at all whatsoever. Like, zombie films are not in my top 50 favorite films at all. So when I made this, I wasn't thinking about the zombie subgenre at all. And I was really thinking about sort of what Pam was getting at, what about memory and what zombies sort of tell us about what it is to be human. So with that, I will share my screen. And also, if anybody is like eating right now, I always say, like, if you're gonna watch this film, like, don't eat, finish chewing. You have a few seconds, save yourself, and just get this all sorted. And should be good. Okay, cool. And with that, this is my film. It's called We Together. That's it.
Such an intense film. Really, really great.
Cool.
So on that note, I would like to open it up to discussion with our audiences. Devin said, wow, wow, I could not hold back my dancing, says Melanie. You know what I couldn't hold back? I couldn't hold back my tears, interestingly enough, because I felt like there's so many people being robbed of their memories, So somebody else take a gander. What do other people think?
Let me jump in and just say, wow, and thank you so much. Every one of those presentations was making me want to dance and cry at the same time. And that's part of, I think, what Athena introduced the topic tonight with her talk in saying that zombies animated her imagination. And I think each of these talks animated our imagination and brought us through some themes of what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be dehumanized? And to have our bodies taken over by these interfaces, by the theme of contagion, by dislocation and disconnection. So I'm really curious how people are experiencing these ideas, the presentations, and also the panelists in the time that we're in right now, and how the work that you've been engaged with as artists and scientists that preceded this moment is seen through this new lens that Pam spoke of as well. I think Jillian spoke about zombies as being otherworldly, and that really struck me because I think it feels like this is otherworldly right now, this time that we're in place that we're inhabiting. So how does our creative practice, our hybrid creative practice with science and art integrated, illuminate this otherworldly experience and perhaps humanize us?
Well,
So what do other people think about this idea?
I'll just jump in for a moment about the present times. I think, we've called it apocalyptic times. In fact, that's what we called the third season of the Zombify podcast, is apocalyptic times, because, the moment that we're in right now is, for some people, more apocalyptic than others, right? I mean, there's a lot of, we have to acknowledge how much, existing inequality is shaping people's experience and also contributing further to inequalities. But at the same time, we don't have a situation where 10% of the population or 20% or 50% of the population or 99% is dying, right? Which is often what we see in zombie apocalypse movies, where it's just a complete devastation of civilization with only a few survivors, right? And then we're left to imagine how we would recreate civilization. We still have a lot of, institutions that are functioning, even though some of our institutions might not be functioning as we would like. And there's a lot that we can salvage from the present moment. But I think that it takes a kind of, there's an opportunity to evaluate and rethink kind of how we have been operating as a society, especially in the United States, because of this moment where there is a breakdown of a lot of things that we've kind of, I think many of us have just taken for granted as part of the infrastructure that we live in, whether it's science itself or democracy or, whatever these institutions are that we kind of inherited. I think it's a moment for us to think about, what do we value? What do we, how do we want to rebuild after these apocalyptic times, and use this moment of, not horrible chaos, but a somewhat chaotic time that we're in, relatively speaking, and animate our collective imaginations about how we want to move forward and address some of the structural issues that have been plaguing us for a long time, and also think about, you know, what are things maybe that we have not yet had as a society that we want to incorporate, you know, whether that's a deeper interplay between science and arts and humanities and medicine to, you know, try to address these issues, or really just kind of creating a space where we can talk about and imagine the future together. So that's what I would kind of offer up, and you know, we're kind of trying to do that with our with the podcast, with ZAM, with Channel Z, but there is, you know, so much that needs to be done, right? We're only just going to be doing a small part of what kind of, you know, needs to be done in terms of getting us to rethink things and rebuild.
Devin Carrion says, I feel like right now we crave connections with people and miss the community we felt even from strangers. And the inability to connect even on a basic level with a nod or a smile has been something that has affected people heavily, making us feel in a sense like zombies. Well put, Devin.
I want to say how much I appreciated this meeting. I think it's fantastic, and it's given me a chance to see and really understand what you're getting at with all the zombie things. And I also wanted to say how much I appreciated Robin's talk as well, because what she said about, you know, comparing racism to zombieism in some ways, and can't we just put it down? I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at things, and I think that that is something that is just such an obvious thing. Just leave it, and it's a great way of looking at it. Thank you so much, Robin, and for all of you. It was really fascinating.
Robin, what are your thoughts right now? What do you think? Oh, you're on mute, I think. Let's get you off of mute. Are you on mute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So as I was watching the film and just thinking about like zombie as genre, and thinking about what Athena was just saying, one of the things that zombies as a concept kind of get at is the vulnerability of like what is the line between what makes you human and what's not human, and nobody wants to slip across that line, right? And so in your film, Henry, like the music like brings them back, right, to like a place of remembering, right? And so I was thinking about, you know, in this moment of COVID, like viruses, the thing about a virus is that none of us are protected, right? Like you can't just, I mean, some of us are more protected than others, admittedly, right? Like I have a job where I'm allowed to work from home, and that's, you know, definitely keeps me safe, right? But we know that we're all vulnerable in some ways. And I think in that way, it really does feel a bit apocalyptic, because you don't know how to protect yourself from slipping over the line into a very kind of unsafe space. And I know, you know, there was a, you know, Athena, I really appreciate you saying that, like, this moment is more apocalyptic for some people than others. And, you know, like 1 in 1,000 Black people have died from COVID, right? And so it's not just like Black people who caught COVID, but like Black people, period, right? And so when we think about like risk and vulnerability, like, and getting really close to the line and trying to pull yourself back and be safe, which is often what zombie genre is about, is like, you know, even in your film, Henry, like people kind of looking and seeing, can we get out of here without getting caught, right? It's like, how do I keep myself safe? That vulnerability is so stark in this particular moment. Like we have social upheaval, we have an election happening, we have a pandemic happening, the vulnerability, the fragility of like the social fabric, which so much zombie art, which Jillian's stuff was getting at too, is like that fragility that is like right where we're living is on that line right now. And so I just that resonated with me with Jillian's pieces and Henry's piece.
Robin, I think there's a really interesting point here about the vulnerability and the fragility, which is that I think if we collectively acknowledge our vulnerability, then that shifts us into a place where we can then collectively deal with the problem. But if there is not an acknowledgement of that collective vulnerability, if there is denial, or some people think that it's not a problem, then that really, I think, interferes with actually acknowledging how interdependent we are and being able to effectively cooperate to deal with the problem.
Yeah, and Jillian, one thing about your work that's so interesting is I feel like you capture the other, and I feel like we're in a moment of the other. So it's like, you know, between Republicans and Democrats, all this racial stuff that's going on, it's always positioned as though we're not looking at the same thing together, which is the other thing about We Together that's kind of cool. But also we're positioned against each other. And that otherness, like those really odd images of the people with the horns and people dwarfed by these massive landscapes. Is that something that you were thinking about when you were up there? When were you up there in the hinterlands up there?
In Scotland, is that what you're talking about?
Is that Scotland? It looked like Iceland to me. Interesting.
Well, there was also Norway, so I don't know which,
Norway.
which
I was
one you're
thinking
talking about.
the Norway images, yeah.
I mean, not with that piece so much. That's kind of a little bit more about ecological disaster, and like, obviously I didn't show you the whole thing, but like the party's over, you know. But then that kind of relates to what we're talking about here now too.
Yeah, it's horrible when we can't focus on that because we have all these other things that are, you know, seem more pressing. Melanie Valencia said, taken from a New Yorker cartoon, when people mentioned the apocalypse, they didn't say all of us would be just sitting around, zombified in front of screens. That moment of the movie of awakening, connection, movement from connection, that was something he did out of will. So are we meeting and sharing art and science. It's pretty neat. What do other people feel? We only have a couple more minutes because I'm going to try to kind of keep it to an hour since I know that Zoom tends to zombify us all. What do other people feel that they are zombified by, either now or pre-COVID?
Yeah, I just want to mention, and this this gets to your question, Pam. Going back to talking about like the line and society right now collectively discovering or embracing an idea that perhaps our society didn't have, you know, like 6 months ago. I think that's like a really kind of core idea when I think about zombies, when I was thinking about the film, making the film. And you can kind of see that. So what I'm getting at is it's like, it's a matter of perspective. And I think Athena, your work, it seems like you're looking a lot at that. Like we might be zombified by things right now. And it's just a matter of looking at it from a certain perspective. And then you see, oh yeah, we are zombified. And that to me is like the really, that's like the horrifying thing about zombies to me. It's not like a zombie is gonna come in and eat me. It's more like, oh crap, am I a zombie? Like I just didn't know. So, and I think in the film, like it was like one of the first things I kind of thought of when I made it was just that moment early on where the hero, we'll say the guy who starts dancing, he all of a sudden like realizes he's a zombie and he gets grossed out by what he is. And yeah, I think that's actually pretty parallel to what's happening in America, at least right now. Like, I think it's just a lot of, you know, nothing's essentially changed. It's just a matter of perspective.
And maybe intensity. I mean, it certainly has ratcheted up quite a bit.
With the
okay,
film,
well, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about it is sort of the provocativeness also of like, you know, in a way, the music is also zombifying, but then, you know, it kind of brings up this issue that, yeah, we're zombified, but not everything that we're zombified by is necessarily bad for us or for others. So, you know, the question of, well, you know, do we need to just try to not be zombified, or do we need to just be very selective about what we let zombify us? Make sure that it's something that, you know, serves our interests and also is, you know, beneficial to those who are important to us or society at large. So the good side of zombification, maybe.
I like ending on that note. I wanted to remind everyone, Diana's helped me remind everyone that there is the next ASU Laser is on November 13th. And that one is about facility of mind, how when you are working with different kinds of people, something happens to your brain, speaking of brains, and it features boredom research and that project. And check out Leonardo lasers, which are all around the world. They're happening all the time. Any last pressing thing that anybody wants to say before we sign off? Okay, well, I hope you've had a good time. We haven't zombified you too much and that we've given you lots to think about. It's been a pleasure to see all your faces and look at all your names. And I hope that next time you come out of the closet and ask some questions, because we are a community here, and I'd like to get to know all of you. So take care, stay safe, and we'll see you next month, maybe. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Your
Pam.
brains were all delicious, by the way.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Great
everyone.
job, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.